Good morning. I am Kevin Price. Delighted to be with you. Going to spend some time talking to you about you and your business. We have a lot to talk about on today's program. I want to get straight to it. As the listener knows, I have a really good new contributor, Christopher Corso. He's an attorney here with offices in both Arizona and recently added Houston to the market. And we have a great time every time he's on the program. And, it's that holiday time of the year, and he's on. His specialty is in defense law. Any long-term listener of this show knows that although I'm a big believer in law and order and keeping things, keeping things in the up and up, I am also a big believer that there's something amiss in the way our legal process is being done, and that people need to be really smart in their engagement with the law. I just strongly believe that, to the point that I've wanted to bring programming that focuses on that. And Chris Corso does a great job of understanding the importance of our civil liberties. And so I enjoy our conversations. Chris, tell us a little more about your practice before we get started.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate being here as always. We're, as you say, we're a criminal defense firm. Started out in Arizona and now here in Houston. Happy to be. We do handle a lot of different types of traffic offenses and different types of criminal offenses. DWI is one of the things we handle. Probably 75% of the practice. So we do a lot of that. And the one thing we try to focus on is people's rights and educating them and what we're doing today, and that's something that's very important to me and to my firm.
Absolutely, and I think it's imperative. People, and again, you and I aren't advocating people to be bad citizens or bad neighbors or bad drivers or whatever. We're just advocating people to look out for themselves. That's kind of part of our responsibility of being good citizens.
It is. It absolutely is. And yeah, you're right. We're not talking about, go ahead and just go out and hurt each other or do different things. But, there's a flip side to that coin, too. You have law enforcement, and they have some rules. And we're all human beings. And so within that, there are tests and limits and bounds and things that just can't, you just can't take advantage of or take for granted. And so that's, we want both sides to be reasonable and follow the law and follow the rights, and everything should come out the way it's supposed to at that point.
Yeah, no question about it. So let's go step by step. Someone's driving along, and then they see those wonderful multicolored lights in their rearview mirror.
Yeah. Well, as soon as your heart comes out of your stomach or your stomach out of your heart, or however you look at that, once that happens, then you pull over, you do what we all know we should do, pull off to the right. And, during the holiday season coming up, there's a lot of DWIs happening. It's a haven for officers to be out there looking for this kind of a thing, and they are looking. And that's the point of what I'm talking about now. So police officers are going to pull you over, and they're looking for something. That's their job, is to try to find something. And so we want to make sure they do it right. So when they pull you over, you do the things that we know to do. You keep both hands on the wheel, listen to what the officer's telling you as far as what to produce, license, registration, insurance, things like that. You only want to answer basic questions. Your name and, again, address, some of that information. You should ask, once you can determine what they're looking for, if they talking to you about if you've been drinking or ask you questions like that, you immediately need to ask for an attorney at that point. And they should stop talking to you. Now, they're very strategic about when to ask these questions and when to say that, hey, you're under arrest or in detention. It's a very simple thing. If you're under arrest or they take you into custody, they have to read you your rights. Everybody knows that before they can use anything against you. But there's an in-between. There's an in-between part, and that's the in-between part when you're first pulled over to when you first end up in cuffs, hopefully not. And that's the part where you have to ask for an attorney at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, I used to believe that law enforcement was primarily in the justice business, and I certainly know that's why the vast majority got into law enforcement. But there's a whole culture. There's a business side to everything, including law enforcement. There's a culture of arrest rather than justice. That's what I've come to conclude, and it's not intentional. And I know on the top of their minds, I've got friends who are in law enforcement, and I'm very grateful for law enforcement. We have absolute chaos without law enforcement. But the reality is that there's this culture, the pressure. There's pressure to tickets. There's pressure to make arrests, and the increasingly the burden is on us as citizens to make sure we defend ourselves, because that doesn't intuitively happen in law enforcement any longer. I don't think. If it ever did, it may never had.
Yeah, you're right. Kevin, quotas, stats, they have to meet them. Revenue, as you say. Everything they do is based on statistics. I used to be a prosecutor. I understand how these things work. And everything they do is statistic-based, the funding and things like that for conviction rates and how many guilties. So the police are an extension of that. It starts with them and their investigation. So if you're pulled over and you have a DWI pending, or that they're investigating you for that, there are things that you shouldn't do, and that you don't need to do, that human element there. It's these subjective tests, such as the field sobriety test. I mean, we've all heard of those. We've talked about the touching the finger to the nose and standing on one leg, walking a straight line. These tests are extremely subjective. The police officer's looking at those and deciding whether or not you're passing or you're failing those tests. So let's not give them that opportunity.
Right. I mean, there's all kinds of physical conditions that people might have and may not even know they have that can undermine those kind of testing.
Yeah. And how about the weather? The weather,
or even
the road conditions. And those play it's a big effect, to what the result will be. And you just don't want to put it in the hands of an individual versus some technology, and that's something that you should never do. You refuse that, and you have the right to refuse that. They can't use that against you if you don't agree to that. Look, there's no wasted movements in what these police officers are doing. Everything they do is for a purpose, and it's to gain information, to turn over to a DA, to be able to prosecute. And that's what they're doing. And so you have to be careful of what you're doing, especially with breath and blood tests, things like that. So it's pretty scary when this is happening.
They're in the convicting business. They're not in the justice business. And that's right. Just the reality. And I don't believe that they think that. You know what I'm saying? It's a very dangerous line on my part I'm not trying to disparage them. I'm just telling them the reality. And the reality is, in the early 80s, I worked as an intern for 2 years in a district attorney's office. I enjoyed it. I loved it. They said, hey, why don't you stay and finish the rest of your college work. We'd love having you to do, research and filing and stuff like that. I know the culture. I know what the environment is like. And again, they were all good people. I know that overall the overriding work is excellent work, the goal of justice, but there's this emphasis, this impetus is a better word, towards just getting people convicted. I mean, that's just the reality. And there's enormous pressures. I can't turn on my TV without seeing another news story of X percentage of cases that aren't solved. Well, the consequence of that is that puts pressures on law enforcement to get convictions, not to get justice.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I was on that side of the equation too, and some of the things that really open your eyes, to see what lengths they'll go to, how far they'll actually go to get these things done, and some of the instructions the officers are getting when they go out on their, they go on in a beat to get these things done. So, yeah, it's pretty scary for people out there. Look, you're already in it's a tough situation and a nerve-wracking situation to begin with once you're pulled over. And it's just not a normal thing. Today, the one thing that you started to mention, and to me, you're starting to see lately on the news and different places, a lot of these, it seems like, today the police officers are too aggressive, and they take too many liberties with our rights and the treatment of us at a scene and questioning. No, it's not that this is new. It's the technology is there now. We're videoing this. We're all seeing this now. Where before, 10, 15, 20 years ago, not everybody had cameras, and the phones didn't have cameras and things like that. I mean, you have, look at this situation, Cameron. You remember the police officer responding to that pool party in Texas, with that case that, it's when you watch a video like that, it's shocking. It's really shocking to see what the officer did in pulling his gun out on people that he didn't even know had anything to do with an incident. And, that's something that when the cameras are rolling, that's when the truth comes out.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's a two-edged sword, though. I got to tell you, those cameras are also being used by government in a big brother sort of way. It really is precarious, but I'm certainly glad the citizens had those tools as well. Always enjoy having Chris Corso on. By the way, Chris, your website.
Yeah, my website's corsolawgroup.com.
corsolawgroup.com. And final thoughts before we wrap up the segment.
Yeah, Kevin, the one thing before we wrap up, I just want to tell everybody again, this holiday, be careful. Some of the do's and don'ts, things you need to know and not know. The blood tests, the only thing you agree to on a DWI at the station, breath test, blood test at the station. That's it. Everything else you say no to. I just want to make sure I get that across to everyone, Kevin, because it's extremely, extremely important. And for law enforcement, just remember the cameras may be rolling sometimes, and we're going to talk about that next week, if I may say. We're going to talk about that holiday, that Black Wednesday. One of the bloodiest holidays is Thanksgiving for drinking, and one of the heaviest drinking holidays. So we're going to talk about that, and I just want people to be careful and know their rights.
Very good. And again, I want to encourage the listener to check out the website, and you're going to be hearing more about Chris. We're going to talk about a lot about many civil liberty issues. The problem is that if it doesn't affect us, we don't think about it. And this is how literally the state ends up dividing and conquering us. And that sounds kind of crazy, but if you look at the headlines of what's happening on a larger level, when you look at the fact that we have only 5% of the world's population, but 20% of the prisoners, people should really be thinking about these kind of things. Corso, C-O-R-S-O, lawgroup.com. Thanks, Chris.
Kevin, thank you. It's always a pleasure. And, stay safe out there, okay?
All right, you too, buddy. All right, when we come back, much more for you right here on The Price of Business.